Welcome to Flow with Arman Assadi. All right, today I have Mr. Steve Little in the house. Steve is an absolute legend in the M&A space, and after selling now, what was it, 6 companies for 9 figures? I mean, that's the most mind-boggling thing I've ever heard. He sold his first company at the age of 15, which was a lawn care business for $250,000. And I think he said he sold 10 of his companies, and 6 of them were for 9 figures. 3 of them were sold to Microsoft. I'll let you tell him, I'll let him tell you all about it, but I'm so excited about this episode. I just wrapped up. The dude is an absolute legend. He's the founder of Zero Limits Ventures, which basically helps entrepreneurs with their M&As, selling their existing businesses or raising capital. And he has a very unique methodology and so much integrity and so much heart behind what he does. And he's a very unique person in this space because not a lot of people are going about it that way. Most people in this space are very money hungry, the sharks at the end of the day. And so Steve's whole approach to this is just awesome. And it's what I would like to see more of in the world. And I think that we just don't have enough people like Steve. And so I'm so honored to know him. I'm so excited to have done this interview. If you are an entrepreneur or a founder or anyone that would ever want to build their own company, you must listen to this episode. It will save you years of struggle positioning your company correctly for that exit and building the right product, as he calls it, and knowing when and how to raise capital. These are all things that we discussed, in addition to going into, well, what's it going to look like in 2021 and beyond in this space. So that is it. Make sure you are subscribed to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you're listening. That's the most important thing. And let me know what you think of the episode. Slide into my DMs or shoot me a text anytime, 619-825-2595. To slide in to the DMs, go to Instagram. That's what I'm referring to, at Arman Assadi. All right. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Little. Let's do this. So, Steve, I definitely have to kick off by saying what I also said to you on our first phone call. When I first entered this space about 10 years ago, there were a lot of names flying around of various people, some of them with pretty shitty reputations, but they still got their
Mm.
names thrown around.
Okay.
And some that immediately, when the name came forward, it was also associated with integrity
Uh,
and an incredibly positive reputation. And I've always had your name in the back of my mind. And when Mike Koenigs and I did our interview, for some reason, I don't remember what we were talking about, but I think it had something to do with just the type of person that I am and you are and he
mm,
is.
yeah.
And through a natural evolution of that conversation came, hey, do you know Steve Little? And I said, well, let me tell you, I've heard his name like a dozen times. And so I have to give a shout out to Mike for connecting us. I'm very grateful. And you are truly a legend in this space, and you've helped so many entrepreneurs, and even the ones that you maybe haven't helped directly. I can tell you that your integrity and the respect you have in the industry is very clear and very tangible.
Well, that means everything to me. I mean, I've always been, sort of a behind the scenes kind of guy. I'm someone who just goes and makes it happen. I don't look for a lot of fanfare and bluster, but it is good to know that I'm doing good work. I
Hmm.
appreciate that.
Hmm. And it's funny because sometimes I think that that is one of the I would say the accidental benefits of sort of being a little bit more behind the scenes is those people that are constantly seeking the validation or the fame. Oftentimes there's a murkiness to their reputation. It's not
Yeah.
clear what their motives are. And with you, it sort of just has been growing and growing and growing behind the scenes, where it's just very clear where you stand with people and the results you've gotten them. It's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that a lot. And any any reputation I have, I hope is good, and I hope I've earned it. Any recognition I've gotten is not sought. So I
It's a good way to
appreciate it,
put it.
but it isn't what I set out to do.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I've been doing this now for 40 years. There's nothing new under the sun when it comes to that for me. And I just always look to push, love and value and help out there. That's really what I want to do. And I've
I'm
been
excited.
blessed with a lot of success in my life, and deserved, undeserved, I don't know, but I've got it, and I've been blessed with that, and I just like to share what I have to share with people and help them do whatever it is they're here to do.
Mm.
And that's the goal. Is
Hmm.
I my job is to help other people do what they're here to do.
Mm.
Right? So,
Absolutely. Well, here's another opportunity. First of all, I will have to say, thank you in advance because I'm going to gain a lot from this conversation. I already did from the last one, and
well,
now we're also recording this one so that other people can gain from this conversation. So, with that said, with the idea of just putting valuable information out there into the world, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about that I wanted to just kind of kick off is this has obviously been a black swan event kind of year. It's been a very different kind of year, and a lot of people went
mm,
into panic mode when it comes to the economy, their personal
yeah,
wealth, and their businesses. Personally, I have seen two different reactions and two different results. That might be a little bit too binary of me to say and overly simplifying, but I've either seen businesses crumble and really take a hit, and I'm mainly looking in the online sector since
mhm,
also that's where you and I spend most of our time,
mhm,
or I've seen them thrive. When you look at
mhm,
some of these e-commerce businesses, for example, one of my clients right now is a company called Glamnetic in the beauty space. They started basically in January. They're going to clear $50 million by the end of this year, and we're
yeah,
recording this mid-December 2020.
yeah,
That's insane. That's
yeah. It's pretty
absolutely
phenomenal.
insane for a
Yeah,
startup. And then you've got businesses that, due to the constraints on their supply chain, due to a squeeze on the capital that they have available, due to their own fear and the reaction to the market, have stumbled and perhaps even crumbled. I'm curious what your take is as someone who's a legend and so experienced in the M&A world when it comes to mergers and acquisitions and fundraising. What did you see in 2020, and what do you
mm.
think is going to happen in 2021?
Yeah. Well, so boy, there's just so many things there in what you've framed up. I mean, um, I think that from the standpoint of the entrepreneur, the business owner, um, well, I like to say to founders, fear doesn't stop you, uncertainty stops you, right? And what happened is we were all presented with a massive amount of uncertainty, and the people who had invested or were willing to invest in resilience, thinking of how they could adapt, how they could pivot, how they could move, how they could, okay, a partner of mine used to say, if you can't sell swings, sell slides, so you figure it out, right? Those
Mhm.
people are the ones that made it through this okay. That wasn't a lot of fun. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of gutting it out, and a lot of disappointment, and you had to overcome fear, and you did that by mitigating uncertainty, right?
Mm.
That's so you so the whole thing about being in fear is that you want to immediately pivot into, okay, let's move. What am I uncertain of? What am I afraid of? Okay, what do I have to do in order to become certain? And that's what I should focus my attention on. So companies that were resilient and had the resources, you mentioned capital, but other resources, people and
Mhm.
creative minds, and the willingness to sit down and say, okay, we're in trouble. What are we going to do? Those are the people that navigated through this and are probably better off now than they were when this started,
Mm.
right? In
Mhm.
terms of the capacity for their business to succeed and grow, not only in terms of revenue, but also value, right? So I think that's number one, I'd say about that for the entrepreneur. In
Mhm.
the investment world, we saw things immediately contract because portfolios were threatened, and at whatever level, whether you're a family office, of an angel, a venture, or private equity, whatever, you probably have a portfolio of investments that you needed to secure, make
Hmm.
sure that they had the capital they need. So every company needed to collect cash. I mean, the most critical moments in the late winter, early spring, that most critical apex of this
Mm.
thing, cash was king. And so that meant that investors had to hang on to cash. Investors had to make sure their existing companies had the cash they needed. Entrepreneurs needed to find ways to get cash, whether that was debt or equity or however they could lower their spending rates, whatever. That
Mm.
was that was preservation. That's how you deal with uncertainty, by the way. You create a
Mhm.
basis of certainty. Okay, right? And so that was the measure we saw there. However, I also knew and recognized that the venture world, and being in the venture world, that we looked at that and said, okay, so we have to contract for a short period of time to figure out how do we make sure what we've got is healthy enough to sustain this.
Yeah.
Just like a human is sustaining the virus, we had to have businesses that could sustain the virus. Um, and once that was done, then of course things switched rapidly the other way, because now all of a sudden you've got great buys.
Mm.
You've got contracted and compressed prices, valuations. You can
Hmm.
move quickly, capture good equity value, and also help those companies that were struggling with the
Mm.
compressed value navigate their way out of the situation. So we immediately saw that lash back. So that came back pretty quickly. Interestingly, I never saw a single ripple in the M&A space.
Mm.
It didn't affect anything in that business, other than some of the people who were selling wanted to sell more quickly,
Mhm.
right? And so they might discount or something. I would advise against that, because, as you know, we're primarily focused on value gain and sticking to our guns and making sure that we're presenting a high value product to the market. But I didn't see any lack of demand. I didn't see people pulling out of their
Yeah.
M&A strategies.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, no, I saw the same thing in my own little micro bubble, but of course, I know you're getting more of a macro overview of all of this, and that's really interesting to hear that people still went out to like that there wasn't any impact in the M&A world. So you talk about this in a
Well,
very
I mean, just say I don't know that everybody would agree with me on that. That's
mm,
my opinion. Okay.
okay, yeah, no, good caveat. Good caveat. Well, we all
Okay.
have our little vantage point, right?
That's right. Right.
Our bird's eye view that we think is our our
Right.
universe.
Right.
Now within that world, one of the things that you do and you talk about that I think I want to learn about, everybody wants to learn about, is how to create the right product. And I love the way you refer to it as a product.
Yeah.
There's so many levers and factors and variables that go into this, and I know it's obviously very complex. So maybe for the sake of it, it's like if we can pick an example of a fake company, an existing company, and go, here's where it is today, and some of the things that are missing when you want to reverse engineer the best, highest valuation, the best
Mm.
outcome for the founders, the best outcome for the acquiring team. Because as you've told me, most of these acquisitions fail. Like,
Mhm.
not that the deal doesn't go through, but that it
Mhm.
doesn't end up being a win for everybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's terrible. So, what is sort of the right way for the entrepreneur to package their product to get the best valuation and make it successful in the end
Yeah.
for
Well, that's another really full question. So you got a couple of hours? I can go on. I
Yeah, I
can I
do.
can I can proselytize on this one. All right.
Please.
Um, I guess the thing that I would say is that um, there are a couple of core principles at work, and then there's just some really solid foundational elements of understanding. And I think the first thing I'd like to point out is that uh, at any given time, every business has multiple potential buyers. Doesn't matter how young or how old, how advanced or how non advanced the company is, there's always a potential buyer for the business. The thing to understand, though, is that each buyer is going to value the business differently and uniquely based primarily on factors that are associated with how much more valuable their business will be by owning your business.
Mm.
So, this is an important thing to understand.
Mhm.
It goes to a principle I say that businesses are sold, not bought. Now, most brokers and bankers see businesses as things that are bought. I don't see it that way at all. I see it as okay, we need to understand what the buying market is for the business. Who are all the potential buyers, and why are each of them interested in buying this company? Now, you're going to have one situation where, if I'm going to give you a simple example, a buyer, let's say I'm looking at buying your company, and I might be interested in your company because I want to acquire your customer acquisition methodology, that you get
Mm.
customers, you retain customers, you develop customers, you have long lifetime value. That I see that as a value proposition that will make my company more valuable.
Mm.
Basically, what I'm saying is I have product, I want to buy a market, and yours is the market I want to buy. Okay?
Mhm.
And let's say that I'm going to place 6 times earnings factor on the value of that asset,
Mhm.
right? Well, at the same time, there's another buyer down the road. He's also interested in your company. But of course, he wants customers, and customer acquisition is an important factor for him. But maybe his principal factor is intellectual property or brand, or maybe he wants your people, right?
Mhm.
Whatever other factor. Let's pick brand, okay? Let's say he wants to buy your brand. Now, what he's saying is he has product, he needs market brand. He needs something to move his product into the market more effectively, and brand identity is going to give him the advantage he needs to do that. And let's say that for that buyer, you're worth 8 times earnings.
Mhm.
Now, if you, as the seller, knew nothing more than that, and you had $100,000 to invest in your company, where would you invest it? Would you
Right.
invest it in customer acquisition, which is going to multiply by 6, or would you invest it in brand, which is going to multiply by 8?
Mm.
I hope you say brand.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So now clearly it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But the point is that if you understand what each of the buying potentials exist in the market are interested in, and how much they're willing to invest in attaining that capability, whatever it is, then you have a much higher probability of leveraging the value of your business into an advantageous position. What we do is we look at 24 different value drivers. So most
Mhm.
business owners are operating off of the unfortunate misimpression that revenue and earnings drive value. Unfortunately, revenue and earnings drive something called valuation, which sounds an awful lot like value, and it
Mhm.
actually gets used as value oftentimes by bankers and brokers. But the reality is, the second principle, valuation does not equal transaction value.
Mm.
And what you really want to do is understand what is the transaction value of my business. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, you combine those two principles, what you see is that there is a right buyer at any given time, right? So whether it's the oversimplified brand example or a more complicated example, considering things like impact, mission, and social intelligence and data strategies and other sorts of factors that affect the value of the business for a particular buyer, the secret is really understanding where you and your business is in the buying market that exists for your business, and how do you navigate or propel, uh, 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 lever the 24 value drivers into a position that maximizes the value for the buyer who's going
Mhm.
to maximize their impression of the value of the business. That's the work we do, and that's really what's at work here. And
Mhm.
so, it's a complex equation, but it's a simple It's one of those things. It's simple, not easy. Or is it easy, not simple?
Yeah.
Simple, not easy, I think is what I
Hmm.
mean to say, right? So, I don't know, did that answer the question?
Oh yeah. No,
Okay.
that's juicy.
Right. Right.
I mean, we entrepreneurs, we run in circles, and
Hmm.
we really do. We don't mean to, right? We're running in a straight line toward revenue and profit usually, and I don't think that would you. I don't think you're saying profit's bad. You're just saying
No.
there are other ways to increase transaction value. That there's different
Well,
ways to look at this and
if
drive the growth of the
if
business.
if valuation equals transaction value, then explain Snapchat to me.
Right.
How
All of
can you
these.
explain it?
Yeah.
Right? I
WhatsApp.
mean,
Mhm.
however many years ago, when Snapchat was worth the paltry $10 billion, it had no revenue, it had no earnings, it had neither of those things, but it was worth $10 billion. How could that be if valuation is the answer? Now it's worth 49 billion or something like that. It's got a little bit of revenue, a little bit of earnings, but nothing that justifies that kind of inflation if
Mm,
that were the formula, right? So
mm.
it can't be the formula. There has to be something else at work, right?
I
And
think what it
now
is
what
though,
we
Steve,
learned,
is entrepreneurs believe they're not Snapchat. They're like, oh, that's just Silicon Valley startups. I'm never going to get that kind of valuation. How would I position my company the right way to ever even
yeah,
get that kind of strategic deal?
well, because if you if you focus on value, but on growing value and not just revenue and earnings, you'll get value. I mean,
Hmm.
you know the old saying, you get what you focus on. If you focus on revenue and earnings, you get revenue and earnings.
Mm,
And if you're lucky and that translates to value that's sufficient for you, then good for you. But if
hmm.
you really want value, focus on value,
Right.
right? And this is the awareness that, frankly, we feel like is our mission to bring to market. We
Mm,
want people to understand how to grow the value of the business, not just grow the business, right? Because there are a lot of businesses out there. I've got a client right now that when we started with them, our assessment turned up a potential transaction value of about 1.5 times revenue, which is okay. It's not all that exciting though. I mean, you're going to pick up $6 to $8 million for your business. That's not
hmm.
bad, but
Yeah.
you're also going to pick up that $6 and $8 million if you stay in business another year, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. So through the process we went through, we identified some internal value that was pent up or constrained, that was locked up inside the company, helped them develop a strategy to release that value. We did have to go raise a little bit of capital for them to complete the pivot, but now the company is going to be worth 12 times that much, right?
That's
So we've
wild.
taken to almost $100 million in value,
Oh my
right,
God.
just by making these changes. Now it's taken us a year to do it, but
Mm.
for a gain of 6 million to 100 million, that's a pretty big gain.
Wow. And
Okay,
that's the new value that the conversations are happening at, or that's a deal
that's
that
the value we'll sell the company at.
yeah. And
Right.
you're confident, like we have now gotten to the point where the valuation of the company should
Well, as
represent.
a matter of fact, I told the founder just last week in our weekly meeting. I said I think we need to start market making now
Mm.
because we're going to hit. We have to go through the market making process, which is the process of us finding all these buyers and
Yeah.
aligning all these different metrics so that we can put the business in front of the highest paying buyer at the right time. All that takes some delicate movement. It'll take us 4 to 6 months to get that done. That
Hmm.
puts us into late Q1. My personal opinion is we've already seen a capital rebound. So we've already seen a rebound in the capital markets that's very aggressive. We're seeing the same thing in the stock market, right? So Q3, Q4. I've said all along in this pandemic that Q3, Q4 are going to be big months or big quarters, and it's
Hmm.
going to be paltry compared to what's going to happen in Q1 and Q2. So in
Hmm.
Q2 we're going to have big buyers with the service and the product that this company generates serves the banking industry. So the banking industry is going to be on a vertical growth path in the second quarter, and they're
Hmm.
going to need this stuff more than anybody. And the problems that this software addresses are the biggest problems they're going to have.
Oh
It has
wow.
to do with access management, right? And so these things are going to collide at the perfect time in the second quarter. So if I rail back and say I need to start making the market now, because it's going to take
Mhm.
me 4 to 6 months to get the market made, then I've got another 60 to 90 days of good old fashioned marketing and negotiation to put in place. And then we're going to get into due diligence. That's another 90 days. So we'll probably close that transaction in the third or fourth quarter of 2021, but it'll be a transaction that's, you know, 100 times what the current value is.
Right, right. Wild. That's exciting. What is driving uh, that vertical growth that's coming, or that the Q1, Q2 acceleration
Mhm.
of the available capital and all of that?
Well, I think that, going into the pandemic, there was already an enormous amount of capital that was stuck on the sidelines.
Hmm.
I mean, there has never been more cash that was stuck. And the thing that had it stuck uh, is this disconnect between, where the capital needs to go and who the capital is coming from. Right now, that's been shifted because, when the pandemic hit and all the investors started moving their money around to make sure that they were covering the needs of their existing portfolios. And now, as we come out of that, they've got excess capital that they preserved. They need to
Hmm.
move that capital because the banking market is going to start putting downward pressure on the value of that money, right? So,
Mm.
for instance, I have a limited partner that's overseas. He's got billions of dollars tied up in the overseas capital markets. He's paying negative interest. So he's paying 2.5% to keep his money in those banks. He needs to
Mm.
repatriate that money in a serious way.
Oh, wow.
So this U.S. Venture market uh, for small and middle market businesses is the perfect place for him to patriate that money and generate high rates of return. And we can invest that money in venture debt at very low interest rates,
Mm.
right, which catalyze a tremendous amount of growth here, generate great rates of return to the venture investor because now he's not paying negative interest. He's getting, although small, he's getting positive interest, but he also has a second bite in a venture equity round. So, it's an
Right.
orchestration of the capital market that's actually going to fuel 2021, early 21 and 22. Actually, early 21, quarter two of 21 is going to be very, very hot, in my opinion.
Hmm. Wild. So, one of the things I wonder, and I know you obviously have an inherent bias in your position, but you help so many entrepreneurs create an almost seemingly exponential growth in the valuation of their companies and the transaction
Mhm.
value. There are so many that go about this by themselves and attempt to
Yeah,
do this alone. What do you have to
yeah.
say to that? Is it possible to navigate this space while running your company and reverse engineering all of this and doing your own assessment and making the market and building the product
Is
and
it po-
dealing with all
you
of
know,
this? A lot of people don't want
well,
to give up any skin. They're like, oh man, I fought tooth and nail for all this equity and I don't have,
yeah.
all that kind of story. I'm
Well,
curious.
I don't want any skin. You know, so the short answer is, can you do it? It can be done. Uh, is it likely to succeed? No. And the reason is very simple. The number one reason for a failed acquisition, or frankly a failed capital acquisition, is
Mhm.
that the owner, the executive, takes his or her eye off the ball, focus their intention on due diligence, and
Yeah.
stops running the company. And I can tell you this, there's nothing that will diminish or bleed the value of your business out faster than you missing your numbers. All
Mm.
right. So when I sit down with a new client and we're getting ready to start making the market for their business, we generate all the financial projections ourselves and we get them to approve those for us. And oftentimes they'll tell you like, well, I think we're going to do better than that. Well, that's great. Doing better is awesome, right? But
Mhm.
what I can't do is go out here with some set of numbers that you're not going to make
Mhm.
because I might get away with it once, right? I might get away with you missing your numbers one time. And when I have some curves that I use to show people what's actually happening here, but let me describe one of them. Let's say again that you were looking to buy my business. All right. And if every time, and we're in due diligence, so we've got a letter of interest, we've got an idea that we're going to actually do a transaction, and now you're in the due diligence. And every time you look at my business, I'm doing as well or better than I said I was going to do.
Great.
What are you motivated to do? You're motivated to move faster.
Yeah.
The reason's very
I
simple.
don't want you to raise that.
I'm taking value off the table,
Yeah.
right? The price is going up. The
Hmm.
value of the business is going up because I'm doing well. So you have a strong motivation to, number one, accept the fact that I know what
Mm.
I'm doing because I'm accomplishing more than I said I was going to accomplish. And the sooner you own my business, the sooner you're going to get to ride that value wave up,
Yes.
right? Now, change the game. Now you're looking at it, and every time you look at it, I did almost as good as I said I was going to do,
Hmm.
right? What are you prone to do?
Drag
You
it
want to
out.
slow down,
Yeah.
pull the reins in a little bit. You're going to say, well, why'd you miss your number in the first quarter? I'm going to say, well, because I overinvested in the second quarter's revenue. So I outspent my marketing budget in Q1, which dropped my EBITDA down. So, but I'm going to make up for it in Q2. What are you going to say?
Let's see.
Well, let's see. Let's see how that works out. Exactly. You know, you know,
Show me. Yeah.
show me,
Yeah.
right? And if it's
Shit.
true, we're back on track.
Uh,
If it's not true, oh, I'm not going to pay the same money for your business, right?
oof.
So this is why I recommend business owners not try to do this themselves. Look, any amount of money, not just me, I can tell you, I'm the most expensive game in town in my business. So it's not just me. Any broker is going to make money on this transaction.
Hmm.
But any amount of money that any of us take should not be a measurable element of this decision,
Mm.
right? In my case, I'm going to get you so much more for your business. My fee is going to be inconsequential to that equation. But even the regular broker, they're not taking a majority of your business. They're taking 4 or 5% of the transaction value,
Hmm.
right? That's not that's not a majority.
Hmm.
One of the other things to remember, and I tell people about this when they're at the other end and we're raising money for businesses,
Yeah.
early stage founders, particularly young people that don't have experience in this world, they all want to hang on to all their equity, right? The thing to understand is the $1 billion unicorns we read about, the founders have like 2% of that
Right.
coin.
Like a
Okay.
couple percent. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
now that 2% is worth millions and millions of dollars. It's not a
Sure.
bad place to be. But you have to take on dilution in order to capitalize, in order to raise the money to capitalize a lot of that growth. Now, there are strange things that do happen. Don't get me wrong. It can happen without that, but it's unusual.
Hmm.
And so the same thing applies when you come out the other end. Don't be pound foolish, right? Understand that you're saving pennies, right?
Hmm.
And if you just go ahead and invest those pennies, you'll end up with the pounds, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's so many ways to look at this, but one analogy that comes to mind for me is like going into the traditional book publishing space
yeah,
without a literary agent. That sounds like hell.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't know how to position the product correctly. You don't have the relationships. You don't know how to navigate the temperature and the mood and the market of those relationships. You don't even know the landscape. I mean,
right,
Random House just bought Simon
yeah,
and Schuster, for example, like
yeah,
I didn't know that, So it's
yeah,
like you have no idea sort of what you're playing at, the language that they use. There's so many subtleties. This is somebody's career is to
yeah.
do
That's
that,
that's
is
the way they make a
navigate
living.
that
They're
space.
experts. I mean, look at it this way: you own a company. You or the people in your company are experts at whatever it is you do in that company, right? You're the
Yeah,
experts, and so you should do that. But I'm the expert at what I do, right? Now,
yeah.
think about this. Another interesting analogy. You
Cool thing
buy
about
a
you though is you've done both as well.
you buy a new car now, right?
Hmm.
You look under the hood of a new car. You know how they have that big plastic cover over the entire engine compartment that says "Do not go here,"
Hmm.
right? Why is that? because the sophistication of the engineering and technology that's in that car now is so far beyond the weekend warrior that's going to change some spark
Mm,
plugs to save himself 20 bucks. That's insane, right? You would never go to work on a new car today yourself,
mm.
not unless you were an expert mechanic and doing it on the
Yeah,
side, right?
right.
So it's the same thing. You really don't belong there.
Mm.
Stay in your lane. Let the professionals take care of this lane. Whatever money you spend on the professional is going to be well worth it. Okay. Right.
So true. So true. And this applies to so many markets.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine trying to find the time for any of that. I mean,
It's
running a
hard to believe
team,
how much
running,
work it is.
it's a
It,
lot.
it,
It's a
and
lot.
people don't get it. I was talking to a potential client just the other day, and they have some issues with the pricing of some of the elements of the engagement. I mean, it's not cheap. I get that. But, I explained to him, I said, look, this individual, they acted as a reference for you. So you know that we sold their business for them. Did you know that by the time we were done, we had 1,500 documents in that data room that we had to create every single one of those documents, right? And he was like, wow, that's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Now, when would you have been able to create those, and when would you have been able to do it and remain compliant to regulatory scrutiny? Right? I mean,
Hmm.
because there's rules that you have to follow, right? So,
Absolutely.
you can say some things, you can't say other things, right? So,
Yeah.
it's important, and the legal fees that would go into trying to keep yourself corrected there, the amount of time and effort you would have to put into it, it's just sort of silly to try to do it yourself. There's no
Hmm.
way you're going to get the maximum gain.
Hmm.
No way. You don't
No.
even know how to begin to
Right.
construct the deal, right?
So right.
And you hear stories. Every time I hear a horror story about a business owner selling their company and feeling like that ripped off, is because
Hmm.
they're trying to do it themselves and they didn't understand the terms of the deal, and they thought they were going to get money that they weren't going to get, or the conditions under which they would get it was such that they would never actually be able to get it, right?
Yeah.
And those are the stories, by the way. Those are the minions that get in the ear
Mm.
of your client, right? In our game,
Yeah.
you're working with a client, and there's always somebody they know that's saying, "Well, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that." It's like, what do they know? They
Yeah.
don't know any more than you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? So,
Absolutely. Projecting based on what
uh,
even? Like what
yeah.
experience?
Well, I have a friend who never did get their
Yeah.
earnout. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
nobody
Oh,
likes an
thank you for, putting your finger out into the universe and looking for an example that doesn't help me. Um, gosh. So I have so many this is such amazing stuff. How many deals can you manage at a time comfortably? I'm curious.
earnout. Well,
And how big is your
depends on what
team
phase.
to support
Yeah,
you?
well,
Yeah.
the team. So I'm pretty virtual. I've got a handful of people that have been with me a very long time. They're mostly arm's length contractors, but they're dedicated, right? So
Mhm.
I've got a finance guy who's been with me a little over 10 years. I've got a valuation guy that's been with me about that long. I've got some research analysts that have been with me at least that long. So, I mean, uh, we can scale it this way. So there are certain projects that team might blow up to 15, 20 people for a short
Mm.
period of time and then contract back down to three of us,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Because we don't need everybody all the time.
Right.
So that's why it's organized that way, because I don't really need an army of people to do what we do.
Smart way to actually run any business is what
Yeah, I think so today,
I've
in
found.
today's terms,
Mhm.
particularly now that nobody has to actually go anywhere. We might as well do
Yes.
it this way. Um, the number of deals we can do in a year, it depends on the mix. So we can do valuation growth assessments. We can turn those out pretty regularly. We can do probably 5, 6, 8 of those at a time.
Mhm.
If we drop in an M&A project on top of that, we're probably going to have to drop 2 of those off, right?
Mhm.
So that would be like 6 assessments and 1 M&A. Then if we had multiple M&A engagements, we're going to be focused on those. Depending again on the size of the engagement. If we're doing $100 million company, that's a lot more work than doing a $5 million company. So,
Yeah.
it sort of has to, you know, go in and out with that. So it's critical that we have burst capacity.
Right.
and that we can contract and scale down to what's really necessary. So I would say if I had to put my number on it, I'd say we can probably do 5 M&A transactions in a year and twice that many, 2.5 times that many assessments. I think that
Hmm.
would be about it.
Hmm.
Now, that's just with current resource. I think we can scale our resources because we use a lot of technology to actually do what we do. So
Hmm. Hmm.
we can get some leverage there that we're not currently taking advantage of.
Yeah, and I'd be curious. I actually want to come back to that because I'm curious, kind of if that would even be something you wanted to do. But before I get there, I think it's really cool to just mention like you've been on both sides of the table.
Hmm.
You, if I'm not mistaken, sold 6 businesses.
Yep. Well,
So
6 tech companies. I've sold more than that of my own. I built 10 companies in my life. So
wow, so
yeah,
6 were just tech companies.
yeah, yeah,
And I don't know if I read this correctly, but it was something like that they were sold for, they were 9-figure acquisitions, or
yeah. Nine
can you
figure
unpack
acquisition.
that? Each
Yeah,
one?
yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit? That's mind-boggling.
Well, I cheated a little bit. I 4 of them were in one industry, and
Okay.
I sort of kept chasing the same rabbit. It was sort of
Sure.
a funny story. So I was involved in the network and systems management industry before it existed, right? So before there were standards like SNMP and so on, when it was really hard to do these things. Actually, I have to date myself as before we had mini computers. Companies back then were either
Yeah.
on mainframes or had minor mini computers, not microcomputers. And when all of a sudden everything went micro, you had this guy who used to take care of a computer room. Now he's taking care of 5,000 PCs that are spread out all over this massive campus or all over the city, or you got some at the university or whatever it is, and that created a whole new set of problems that no one had really thought through, and there were no applications for that. So we saw that as a really fascinating potential. I don't want to burn too much of your time here, but as a funny
No, I'm
story, I was
loving it
sitting
all.
sitting on an airplane one day back when there was uh, the old 727, I think it was. We had 3 and 3, really crowded plane, three on each
Mhm.
side, and I was in the middle seat. God help me, and hot on the tarmac. I was between two individuals that were working from the Tennessee Valley Authority. One of them was named Jess Case, the other one was named Marshall Rose, and they were talking across me. Now they didn't know that I was the supervisor of the Satellite Communications Center for GTE SpaceNet, but they were talking about this technology they'd invented called SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, and they were describing it. It was a piece of microcode that they could embed in a chip on any device. And they could access it through an IP connection and get data from it. And I sat and listened to him for a while. There was a little pause in the conversation. And finally I said, gents, I haven't been trying to eavesdrop, but you are talking right across my lap. And I just thought you might like to know that I have relationships with every internet hardware manufacturer in the world. We're probably one of their top customers, and I could probably get that microcode dropped into every one of those devices if you'd be interested in talking about that.
Wow.
So,
Wild.
long story short, we seeded the market with millions and millions of these microcodes, right? And what
Yeah.
I knew is there was no software to talk to them.
Hmm.
So I went out and built a team to build some software that would go ping all these devices. And at the time, it just painted little strip charts on a computer screen, but that was more information than the administrator had before. So it was worth something. Built a company around that, sold that company. And then
Damn.
I went back into the same microcode, built a little bit more elaborate software, did a little bit more, had some rules engines and some heuristic modeling and that kind of thing. So we could process alerts and stuff. And
Mhm.
went out and sold that company. And then the last 3, I sold all 3 of them to Microsoft. So I really
Mm.
cheated on that one. I sold one,
Mm.
then I say, hey, what else are you guys working on? They'd tell me, I'd go build a company to do that, and we'd come back.
Oh, wow. Wow. What was your role in building these companies? Like a little bit of everything or
No, I was the CEO.
okay.
I was the visionary. I
Okay.
hired. I'm one of those people that I don't do anything that I'm not suited to do.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to have a software guy, I'm going to go hire the best software guy I can find. If we need a product manager, we're going to go hire a product manager. I'm not going to try to do that work
Yeah.
myself.
So with those companies, were you raising capital each time? Were you
Mm,
bootstrapping those?
most of them were bootstrapped up to a point, and then it was the capital acquisition that we used to get them ready for acquisition. So it was always the same formula. We'd grow to a point, we'd shorten the acquisition curve by injecting capital so we could
Hmm.
accelerate to a breakout, and then we'd sell them after the breakout.
So this is something that you have been doing since your days as an entrepreneur, your current model for how
My
you,
very first business. I
yeah.
sold my first business when I was 15 for $275,000, $247,000. You know,
Hmm.
um, and what I learned was the value driver.
Yeah.
Right. What I did, I built a lawn care company, and we go out and cut people's yards. That's what we did. Right.
Hmm.
And then it was in the summer, Pennsylvania. It was hot. Grass doesn't grow that fast in the summer in Pennsylvania. So every week I'd get on my bicycle. I'd go from door to door. I had 130 yards I was cutting. So I'd go knock on doors. I'd say, "Hey, Mr. Smith, come by and cut the grass tomorrow." And he'd say, "Yeah, it's great. See you tomorrow," whatever. Um, but then I started to hear, "Well, no, it's not growing that fast. Give it another week. Come back next week."
Hmm.
It happened like 5 times in one day. And I was walking down the driveway of one of these houses, and I thought, "Man, this is going to cost me some money. I got 30 laborers I'm paying here.
Yeah.
This is not a good deal. I got to figure this out."
Hmm.
Long story short, I came up with the concept of an annual and a semi-annual contract. And the offer was, if you'll sign the annual contract, I'll cut your grass in the summer, I'll rake the leaves in the fall, I'll shovel the snow in the winter. In the spring, if the storms drop twigs and mess up your yard, we'll come clean it up. So we're not going to do any landscaping, but we're going to keep everything looking groomed, right? So it's
Hmm.
always going to be groomed. Everybody went for that contract, right? Because it was cheap, right?
Hmm.
And so we accumulated. I called it Steve Big Book of Business. I had one of those spiral bound notebooks with the blue cloth covers on it. I wrote on there in a magic marker, Steve's Big Book of Business,
That's so cool.
and kept all those contracts in there. And every week I would cut the invoices, and every week the checks would come, and it
Wow.
was like that. And or a month rather, I should say. And one day my dad came home and said, "Hey, I've been transferred. We're going to move."
Oh.
And I said, "Well, what am I going to do with my business?" Well, he thought that I
And
was
you were
just
how
cutting.
old again?
Well, it's 15 at the time.
Wow.
And he thought I was just cutting some neighbors' yards, right? And
Yeah.
so I said, "No, Dad, I don't think you understand." So I went upstairs, got my big book, and put it on the table in front of him. He's leafing through it. He gets about halfway through that book and says, "Oh my God." And all of a sudden it dawns on him what he's looking at. He goes, "These are all your customers?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "How are you doing that with that little old lawnmower?" I said, "Oh, I got a whole garage full of equipment up the road, man. We got 30 guys working for me. Geez, man, here's my payroll." you know,
Oh my
he's
God.
like going, what have I created here, right?
Yeah.
He's an engineer, and he looked up. He goes, I don't know what to tell you, son. I have no idea. I mean, this is so far beyond me. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe somebody will buy it." I said,
Yeah.
"Okay. Well, I just read about these companies that are moving in here, companies like Long Doctor and what's the other one, whatever." And so I said, "If you'll drive me in there on Saturday, I'll see if I can't sell it to one of them." And which is exactly what we ended up doing. Now imagine being the general manager of that company, and here I come walking in, a 15-year-old kid with,
Unbelievable.
at the time, 165 annual care contracts already signed and sealed, right? I walked in and
Mhm.
showed him. He had the same experience. He was leafing through it, got about halfway through, and all of a sudden realized what he was looking at. And he said, "You got all these customers? These guys pay every month?" I'm going, "Yeah." He said, "Does anybody ever miss?" I said, "Yeah, sometimes, but not. I mean, it's not like a big collectible here." The first
Mhm.
guy offered me 187,000,
Wow.
which was exciting, right? So I went out to the car. My dad said that happened. I said 187,000. He said, "Yeah, it's awesome, son. Give me the check. I'll put it in your bank, in your college fund." I said, "No, no, no. Wait a minute. We're going to go up the street to the next guy. Let's see what he'll do, right?
Mm.
Because if this guy will give me this, he might give me more." And so that's how we got it to 247. And it's funny. I never saw a dime of that money, but it did pay for my college. So So,
Wow. You
yeah.
have been doing this since
Well,
essentially day one.
it's a fun story, and obviously I have fun telling it. But the real key is understanding
Yeah.
that the value driver in that business was the book.
Yeah.
If I'd never made the book, I had nothing of value.
Hmm.
I had laborers and I had equipment.
Yeah.
With no
But that book of
contract,
business and
the
contracts and seeing the accounts receivable coming in consistently.
yeah. I mean,
im-
imagine he's got pesticides and fertilizers
Oh,
and
he's
all
thinking
kinds of
I'm going
other.
to
He's
take
got
each of those customers
yeah,
and 3x them.
yeah, easy,
Yeah.
easy, with no
Yeah.
brainer. Plus, just the lawn care services he was going to quadruple.
Just win on.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
Wild. You
right?
you you said something about what you've done in your other businesses and what you also do for a lot of your clients is you look at um, capital as a way to accelerate toward the acquisition. How do you know when you should raise that capital?
It's a fascinating question, and I appreciate you asking it. So, there are a lot of factors that we consider, but again, doing the assessment process that I've talked about, and I I don't want to sound like I'm selling that, but we go through this analysis, and what we're doing is we're looking in three areas. We're looking at things that exist in the business that are constraining its value.
Hmm.
And we develop plans and strategies to alleviate those constraints. We look at things that do or perhaps don't yet exist in the business that could enhance its value, and we develop plans and strategies for that. And then we look in 1 or 2 degrees of separation in the adjacent markets to see if there's hidden value, in an adjacent market. And we develop plans and strategies for that. We
Hmm.
compile all of that and do a lot of research, a lot of market research, a lot of analysis, a lot of number crunching and so on. And we come up with something called a summary of recommendations, which is a detailed breakdown of every value potential we found with instructions or recommendations on exactly how to capture that value.
Hmm.
That then gives us the roadmap. So we now have a roadmap of value creation.
Hmm.
So we can now map that to a time horizon and say, okay, based on this roadmap, we reach maximum value trajectory right here. Let's say that's 9 months from now.
Hmm.
Okay, well, if it's inside of 15 months, we got to get busy packaging the company right now because it's going to take us 6 to 9 months just to get that part built, right? If it's outside of that, we're able to tell the founder that, okay, so here's the ideal trajectory for your acquisition, your maximum value acquisition. Now, you
Hmm.
don't have to sell at the maximum point. I don't know why you wouldn't, but you don't have to, right? A lot of times uh, you'll see, so you can imagine that, all right, we're coming up with strategies for capturing value. Oftentimes, the strategies we develop can't be capitalized by the company's current cash resources,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Now, the company has a choice. They could leave the portion of the value gain that can't be capitalized on the table, and we can do the best we can do to represent it as a future value component and get some of the value.
Hmm.
Or we could go ahead and raise the capital necessary to implement those strategies,
Ah.
implement them, and then realize 100% of the gain potential, right? So we
Ah.
have the example of the software company I gave you a little while ago as an example of the decision there was to go ahead and implement the strategy. We probably could have gotten a gain of maybe 300% without actually making the investment on building the software.
Hmm.
But when you compared that to a 1,200% gain, it was sort of silly not to do it,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Considering that it
No
was
brainer.
all we needed was a couple of $1 million. I mean, that's not cheap, but it
Yeah.
it wasn't like we needed
It
to
does
go
add a
raise
time
hundreds of millions.
it adds a time factor to the whole
Right.
deal, but
Exactly.
I mean, if you're looking at 4x your previous valuation, it's kind of a no-brainer. One
Yeah.
of the things I imagine you that I can both feel and I imagine you needed to cultivate is patience. These deals, this life, this
Yeah.
journey,
Yeah.
I mean, you seem very patient. Am I
There's a lot
understanding
of
that?
waiting. There's a lot of waiting.
Yeah. Yeah, like I've gone through that just with this current company in different ways, whether it's
Yeah,
fundraising or trying to make a
yeah,
certain deal happen or a partnership deal that I just closed. And I mean, God, these things, you got to wait a lot. And
yeah,
people don't, I'm really fast. So I can be impatient when people
yeah,
are not at my pace.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you deal with all that?
Okay, so this is some magic. I'm going to give you guys some secrets here. Okay, so there is a lot of waiting, and in particular, in the case of an M&A, there's another element that comes into play here. Is if you get within a couple of months of the transaction, the seller begins to become irrational. So the waiting becomes a more significant problem because
Mhm.
there's a lack of rationality. There's a lot of angst, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of limiting beliefs, there's a lot of upper limits, there's a lot of things that are happening psychological
Yes.
to this person. And we have to be very skillful at how we navigate through that process. So, what we do is I learned a secret about 10 years ago that, well, if I can get the founder, who I'm about to get, a check for $20 million for, or whatever the number is, right? If I can get them focused on what's next, what are you going to do with the 20 million? So the conversation goes like this. I mean, so in a few months, I'm going to get you a check for $20 million. What are you going to do with it? Your response is generally like, what? I mean,
They
I hadn't
haven't even
thought of
gone
it.
there, right?
I
Like,
haven't, yeah,
I don't know,
I don't know.
buy that
Say,
boat I
okay, well,
wanted.
we need to start working on that, right? Because
Mm,
it's really important that you know what you're going to do with it, not just for tax protection and all that kind of stuff, but really, quite frankly, you built this business for a reason,
yeah,
right? And so, what
yeah.
was the reason? What did you want to accomplish? I mean, was it housing the homeless in Haiti? Was it feeding the starving kids in Chicago? Was it, cleaning the ocean? What was the reason? What was it? What's motivating you? Now, if I can get that founder focused on a mission,
Mm,
all of the irrationality disappears. And now there's not enough time. There's plenty of time, but now there's not enough time, right? Because now the transaction is just something that's going to happen along the way to
toward
accomplishing this bigger mission,
yes,
right?
yes.
That's what led me to my ultimate transition here that we spoke about last time we talked. Is that realization where before we used to have to use all kinds of tools and psychological tricks and methodologies to sort of get through this thing, and we'd have them, they'd do stupid stuff, they would blow up a deal, we'd have to go get another deal, and all this crazy things that would happen. Right before it was that, right? And then I had an epiphany one day. I said, look, my whole thing is about catalyzing people to have impact. I mean, I've made a lot of money. I don't have any of that money because I give that money away, right? It's not about having money for me. It's about investing it and expanding it, putting it to work, growing it, right?
Mm,
Giving it to people. Like I give a lot of money to an organization called Pachamama Alliance that's about preserving the Amazon rainforest. I give a
mhm.
lot of money to oceanographic research because I think the oceans are in trouble, and so on. I
So you
support,
give most of the money you've made away, is what you're essentially saying?
or I invest it,
Mhm.
right? I don't keep it. I mean,
Yeah.
keeping money is, that's a miser's game. I
Mm,
have to, so it's in play or at risk somewhere,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Um, so it's something that people really don't think about is that
Yeah,
investors really aren't walking around with wads of cash in their pocket. That's really not their game. Their game is to keep their money working and moving.
absolutely.
Anyway, I'm a little bit off course there, but I believe in that um, business owners. Well, let me put it this way: I don't believe we can solve the problems that plague humanity with charitable giving alone.
Mm,
Charitable giving is important. Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
We should all give. I mean, it's biblical if nothing else, right? So it's
Mhm.
got a lot of good reason behind doing it. Okay, and it is true. The more you give, the more you get. That's a true statement. Okay, so that concept exists, notwithstanding the work we do. But I also believe that in order for us to actually address the issues that are scaling with humanity,
Right.
we need humanity to develop solutions to the problems that are being generated by our existence. That
Absolutely.
says to me, we need businesses to create sustainable solutions to the problems that we face. Now that might be a business doing something directly, like I built a machine that cleans the
Mm-hmm.
ocean. That's a direct contribution.
Right.
It might be an indirect contribution. I take 42% of our earnings and I give it to the company who built the machine that cleans the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's an
Mm-hmm.
indirect contribution.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's our responsibility as business owners to keep our focus on why are we building this business? It's not just to accumulate cash, it's not to build a big bank account. Yes, we want to have a secure retirement and so forth, but frankly, it doesn't take billions of dollars to do that,
Hmm.
right? You look at the billionaires that we know about, they are activating their money. They're putting their money to work, and a significant amount of it is going into cause support, right? That's the
Yes.
right model, right? So when I had this realization that what I'm doing is helping people multiply the value of the asset they've invested their lives in, all of a sudden I recognize that, oh, wait, I forgot the rest. I need to help them connect in to the path of giving.
Mm-hmm.
So now they can take the $20 million and I don't know, maybe put five away and put 15 to work or
Yeah.
whatever the formula is, right? Um, but in order to do that, they would have to have this orientation,
Already.
right?
Yes.
So what I did,
Hmm.
it was a little bit scary the first time I did it, but I think it was maybe 5, 6 years ago, maybe more. I made an announcement at an event, in fact, an event of entrepreneurs where I stood up. I said, I've made a decision. The decision I've made is I will take any company into the valuation growth assessment process and I'll generate the valuation growth roadmap for them. However, any company that wants to work with me beyond that
Mm-hmm.
will have to have an impact mission. If you don't have one and you won't take one, I can't work with you.
Hmm.
That's had a profound impact on the
Wow.
influence that our business is having on the world, right?
Yes.
It's not just on us, and that's really not what it's about at all. It's I got a divine download some years ago that said your job now is to catalyze other business owners into this position of giving.
Mm.
And by doing that, we'll address these problems that plague humanity. We'll make this world a better place. We'll
Absolutely.
provide for the people who need provision, right? We'll create the innovations that need creating. That's the way it's going to happen. And it's at the grassroots level. It's not top down.
Right.
It has to come bottom up.
Mm.
Right. So anyway, that's I told you I could proselytize about
Wow.
this.
Man, that's so beautiful. I feel so honored to have this conversation with you, Steve. You are an incredible
uh,
human being, and that's just remarkable.
well,
Really
thank you.
remarkable.
I appreciate that acknowledgement,
I
but
absolutely, and I look forward to just supporting everything you're doing in so many ways for so many years. This has been super super fun. I'm curious, what are the ways that people can really just directly get involved and support you? I know there's obviously um, zero limits, but there's the charities that you're involved in. There's a lot of different things. So I'm just curious, how would you like to address that? How can we all support you?
well, I think the best thing to do is just to reach out. I mean, everybody's got their own contribution to make, and
Hmm.
I just met with the team yesterday or Monday, whatever day today is, Monday, and told the team that hey, what I really want to stay focused on with our messaging is that we're here to give. And so if we have a business owner out there that needs help with a strategy, needs help with overcoming a problem, or is interested in growing value, doesn't know how to do it, or whatever the case might be, I want to make sure that all of our systems are facilitating that,
Mm.
right? I don't want to put any roadblocks in front of anybody getting to the information they need. So we've experienced, like a lot of people have, how do you get through your digital marketing transformation and so forth. And we've got a lot of cool stuff. But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure people can get to me if they want to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's really the most important thing to me. So I've got webinars and I've got video articles and I've got downloadable PDFs and all that stuff. And anybody's welcome to any of that. You can find any of it on the website. I've got if you go to zerolimitsventures.com/free, you can download all of it and get whatever you
Amazing.
want, right? But most importantly is if you want to get on the phone and work your way through an issue, I look at an hour-long consultation as a consultation, not a sales call.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give you what you need in that hour. And if it can't be done in the hour, we'll schedule some more time and keep working on that. Now, out of that, there may be an opportunity for us to work together in a fee-paid capacity, but let's let that develop naturally. We don't have to worry about setting that up in the beginning. The best way to do that is go to zerolimitsventures.com/apply. Very short form to fill out. Pumps you right into my calendar,
Awesome.
and we'll get together and do some work.
Beautiful. I will include all those links in the show notes for everybody as well, along with resources to everything we talked about to just support all of this. But Steve, really, really honored, really appreciative of your time. This was so, so good. And yeah, I just really look forward to supporting you. I already have a few people in mind, actually, that I need to connect you with that are
Great.
just phenomenal, impact driven human beings. And yeah, man, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and just keep up the good work you're doing.
Will do. Well, that is a wrap. There it is. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to share this with your entrepreneur and founder friends. This is invaluable. Just grab the link, send it over to them, text it to them. They need to hear episodes like this that will save them years of pain and struggle. Make sure to check out Steve at zerolimitsventure.com. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. Wherever you're listening, you should be able to see that. If you're watching, you should be able to see that as well in the show notes at armanassadi.com. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, much love. Peace.